Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my July reading wrap up for 2025. I read a total of 8 books this month and my average star rating was 3.13 stars, which I would consider a good reading month because anytime that my star rating is above 3 stars, I consider that it's mostly good because it means that I mostly enjoyed the books that I read or that I got a bunch of new favorites and had a couple that were misses, you know? I mentioned this a little last time, but I've been struggling really heavily with dissociation, so it was really hard for me to get completely invested and focused in books this month. So I did a couple of rereads and those rereads went pretty well. However, recently I've been so foggy with the dissociation and so out of it that some of these books I remember the gist of, but I don't remember specific details because my brain was not very present when I was reading. I'm still working on it. I'm working on it in therapy. Without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in July. The first book I read was a reread, and this is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, obviously the second book in the Harry Potter series. This was my 6th time reading this book, and I am trying to get the number of times that I've read each book in the series even, because I've read Sorcerer's Stone and Cursed Child more than the other books in the series, so I'm hoping that eventually I'll get it to the point where I've read each one an even number of times, and then each year after that I can read them once each year to keep them an even number, you know? So this year I'm not reading Sorcerer's Stone, I'm just trying to make the numbers even, which means that I am reading Chamber of Secrets, and this is where my rereads start for this year. I really enjoy Chamber of Secrets. It's really fun and light. I just really cannot stand Lockhart. He bugs me so much. And I sort of like that there's such a mystery in here where it's sort of a mystery unfolding, and I feel the first 2 books have that huge mystery element that some of the other books don't have, which is really unique and fun. Of course, I gave this one 5 stars because it's the Harry Potter series. It's my favorite series and I love it so much. And then I read One Punch Man Volume 14, The Depths of Despair by One. So I have been reading the One Punch Man series for a little while now. I got into it basically because my brother really liked the anime and I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. And it started out really good. So it's about this guy who is basically super overpowered to the point that he can defeat every single villain in one punch. So he's basically going around in life aimless, trying to find a villain that could give him a thrill that he can actually have a fight against. However, the problem with this series is it gets so repetitive. Now I really love Saitama and Genos. They're my 2 favorite characters. I love them so dearly, and because of them I may continue with this series. However, it's just so repetitive. Literally every single one is just, oh, the normal heroes are going to go and attack this villain, but they're struggling, and then One Punch Man comes and he just hits them with one punch and then he beats them easily. And it's always oh, Saitama's running late, oh, and then he gets there after all the heroes are struggling and just bam and done. And it's the same thing every single time, and I can tell that they're trying to build this bigger plot, but until they get rid of this whole pattern of the hero struggling and Saitama coming to save the day, it's gonna keep being repetitive. And so I'm really tired of this series. And I also have this thing that might cause me to continue reading this series, and I hope that I can get rid of this thing. I think it's my OCD, I'm not 100% sure, but with the Shonen Jump app, when you open the app it says continue reading and it has One Punch Man on there. And I found out that there's a way to take it off of my currently reading. However, I know from experience that I had that problem with Netflix where the continue watching would be there and then I'd feel obligated to finish the series, and I still do feel obligated to finish the series. My phone ran out of phone storage. So anyways, back to what I was saying. With Netflix, for example, I have the same problem where it's on continue watching, and there was one time a series that I really hated the first episode and I wanted to quit, and so I deleted that off of my continue watching, and it has haunted me ever since. I'm definitely gonna go back and finish that anime at some point because it haunted me that it was on my continue watching for a while and then I took it off my continue watching, and I don't know what that says about my OCD and my brain and how it overanalyzes things, but basically because there's that continue reading section on Shonen Jump, I most likely will eventually continue with One Punch Man unless I can get my OCD under control. If it is my OCD, I have no clue what else it could be. Could be anxiety, could be overthinking, I don't know. But it's I feel an obligation to finish something whenever an app has a continue watching or continue reading section, and I don't know what it is, and I don't think it's very productive for myself, but I don't know how to get rid of it. But yeah, basically back to the book, since that was a ramble about how my brain works. I just didn't like it because it was so repetitive. I also feel the jokes don't really hit as much anymore, they aren't as funny. And so because of that, I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. I gave it 2 instead of 1 star because I still like Genos and Saitama. However, it's not a great series in my opinion after a while. It starts off so good and it just goes so downhill. And I probably will not end up re-enjoying this series later unless it drastically changes. So if it drastically changes, you should let me know, because if it does drastically change and stop having the same formulaic plot, I think I might like it, you know, because I like Genos and Saitama. But Yeah, who knows? I'm just putting off continuing the series for a little bit, and so I'm like starting Moriarty the Patriot this month in August, so let's see how that goes. Maybe that'll be a series that I'm more into as opposed to One Punch Man. And then I read another Harry Potter book, and this one is Prisoner of Azkaban, of course, because going in order. Now, Prisoner of Azkaban is probably my favorite at the moment. However, sometimes I feel like Goblet of Fire is my favorite because I just love the Triwizard Tournament so much, but like Goblet of Fire definitely has some slow parts, and Prisoner of Azkaban does not have those slow parts, so I love this one so much. The only thing I really struggle with Prisoner of Azkaban is Wormtail, and I really struggle with how Harry and Ron treat Hermione after they think that Scabbers has been eaten by Crookshanks. That part of the story really irks me because I'm like, a Harry in particular should be there for Hermione and at least talk to Hermione a little bit, and like it's a whole mess. But other than that, I really love this one. I really love the look into the Marauders, of course, and so this one was a 5-star read for me, and this was my 6th time rereading this one as well. And then I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Red, White, and Royal Blue, in case you don't know, even though it's like uber popular, so most people know about it. It's a romance between the first son of the US, so like the president's son, and a prince in the UK who's like part of the royal family. So it's like a forbidden romance, which I really like that element of it. I thought that element was really fun, and I do really like the romance part in here because I really think that these two characters really helped each other grow, and I don't think that I fully liked these two main characters until like they became in love and like started changing for each other and stuff. I really need to hurry up and talk faster because my phone keeps running out of storage. I also really liked the inside look into US politics and how hard that is on minority groups in this book, and I liked those elements of it. And so because of that, I generally think that this book was like okay, and like I mostly liked it. However, so many of the characters pissed me off and I could not stand them, especially Nora and June. I can't stand them. Oh my god, they're so annoying. And like even Alex and Henry were so annoying at the start of the book, and I also think that there was a problem with this book where it was like way too hyped for me, and because it was way too hyped and it wasn't like amazing and like perfect, I ended up feeling really disappointed by it. I also listened to the audiobook version of it. Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. The audiobook version is not great because the audiobook narrator sucks. And I hate saying that because I know that like a lot of time and effort was put into making this audiobook. However, it sounds like a middle-aged guy or like an older guy trying to pretend to be someone who is a young adult and in my age range when he's clearly not. And whenever he read LMAO, like a part of my soul died. He would literally go LMAO, and I was like, why would you read LMAO off like that? Like, it was irking me so much, and LMAO is apparently in this book a lot because there were so many times that he'd say that, and it was just like really grating on my nerves. So anyways, audiobook stuff aside, I still would think that this is a 3-star read. If I really like factored in audiobook narration into this book, I would have given it a little bit of a lower rating. However, the way I sort of do audiobooks is I comment on the audiobook narration, but I don't let that influence like my star rating, and like the rest of my rating and like my review and stuff are based on the book itself. So yeah, this is a 3-star read for me. It was okay. There was some stuff that I liked about it, some stuff that I really didn't like about it. I think it's generally just really overhyped, and if you have troubles with reading overhyped books because you feel like they end up being disappointing, then that problem will probably apply to Red, White, and Royal Blue. I have another book by Casey McQuiston that I'm going to give a chance. I think I have one last stop, and hopefully that one works really well because Casey McQuiston writes some really interesting books. Like the premises sound really interesting, and so I'm really hoping to get more into Casey's books, but I'm thinking that Red, White, and Royal Blue perhaps was just too hyped and the other ones aren't as hyped, so hopefully the other ones work really well for me. And then I read Black Clover Volume 1. The story in art is by Yuki Tabata. So this is a manga essentially where there's this world where there's like tons of mages, and basically the premise is that this main character right here, Asta, he has no powers. He has no powers at all, and he's determined to become the like greatest mage, but he has no powers. So it's sort of reminiscent of like My Hero Academia in that sense. However, it has most of the typical like cliches that you see in like fantasy manga, so it's like very typical, and the plot isn't that unique because it's like I felt so much like deja vu, like I've read this before because it's so reminiscent of other manga series. However, there were some characters that I really liked in here, and I think there's a lot of potential for this series to like stand as its own and be really unique in the later volumes, so I'm gonna give at least the next one a chance. Side character wise, my favorite characters are Yuno, Luck, and Landgrace, and so I'm hoping that like the later volumes like explore those characters more. And I would still say that it's like a pretty solid like first volume in a manga series. It's just nothing special, so I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. There was stuff I liked about it. I'm gonna give it at least one more shot with the second volume. However, it's nothing like too amazing as of the first volume. And then I read a graphic novel. I read I Am Not Starfire. This is by Mariko Tamaki and the art is by Yoshi Yoshitani. So this is a DC graphic novel for young adults, and I'm really like vibing with these. Like, they work really well. This one follows this girl right here, and she is Starfire's daughter. This one started off really rough for me. The characters are really unlikable, especially the main character right here. And so it started off like really rough, and I was like, oh god, I don't think I'm gonna actually like this one. However, there's a lot of character development and growth in here, and so that made it so that eventually by the end I was really enjoying it. I also really like the romance in here. I think the romance was really well done. I hope that I Am Not Starfire gets a sequel at some point in the future, because I think there's a lot of stuff that can still be explored, like the romance could be explored more, and basically what happens to her at the end of the graphic novel can be explored more. So I think there's a lot of room for a sequel. However, I still think this one works pretty well as a standalone, so I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I would have given it 5 stars if it didn't start off so rocky. And then I listened to a second audiobook, which helped me finish my goal of listening to 2 audiobooks this year, and this one was Junkyard Cats. Junkyard Cats is by Faith Hunter. This one is a sci-fi, like, futuristic one, and essentially in this future world, the world has been like mostly destroyed by like a huge war that broke out, like a world war. And there's this gal, and she's living in this junkyard by herself, and she's collecting pieces and she's selling off those pieces to make money, and she has cats. You have to get through a good chunk of the book before the cats start playing a big role. I would assume that they'd start playing a role from like the start of the book based on the title, but it's not really true. But eventually some like threats start coming in on the junkyard, and so it turns into this like fight for survival and fight to maintain her peace and her junkyard. So I love cats. I love futuristic books. Junkyard Cats did not work for me. All of the characters are extremely unlikable and bland. I could not stand any of them. There was nothing redeemable about them really. And the romance, it was never like fully dived into deeper. It was very forced and very uncomfy, and I did not like the romance at all. Also, a lot of this book is just info dumping to the point that it was so boring, and there was so much information being dumped on me that like I couldn't keep track of all of the world building and how everything worked. And there was so much info dumping even during the action scenes that even the action scenes were extremely boring. So I ended up giving this one 1 out of 5 stars. It was my least favorite book that I read this month. I don't really have anything positive to say about this book besides the fact that like the premise of like a futuristic book where like cats play a role would be really interesting, but Junkyard Cats was just really disappointing for me. And then the next one I finished literally on like the last day of July, and this is Because You'll Never Meet Me. This is by Leah Thomas. So Because You'll Never Meet Me is one that I found in a free little library a couple years ago. It sounded so interesting. It's about these 2 boys who are pen pals, but they can never meet. The reason they can never meet is because Ollie is allergic to electricity. He lives out in the woods by himself, and Moritz, his pen pal, lives in Germany, and Moritz has a pacemaker, so he has to survive using electricity. And so the 2 boys can never meet, so they become pen pals. I thought that this one would be really good because it sounds really interesting and unique. However, it really didn't work for me, mostly because the characters in here were very unlikable to me. They are 14 and 16, however they read as like basically 3rd graders, so they are really immature in the way that they are written. I found Ollie to be really annoying, and I was so sick of him crushing on this girl who treats him terribly to the point that she did some stuff that could have ended up with him dying. And then Moritz, I couldn't stand him because he had sort of like this ego, like this snobby ego that I couldn't stand, and then he does something in the middle of the book that is so terrible that I cannot like him, and I hate him for that. And it would have been more palatable to me if Ollie had like called him out and been like, what you did is wrong. However, Ollie offered support instead. I also feel like there wasn't enough of a plot in here. Like the pace was good, it like did fly through, but there wasn't really much substance to this book. So I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. It didn't really work for me. I will not be continuing with the series, of course, because I didn't like this one, and also the last 2 chapters like drastically change pace to set up the sequel, and the sequel is like road trips for the boys. And I'm like, how do you go from this book that's exploring their health issues and how they're isolated from everyone else to just going, oh, we're just going to toss them on their own individual road trips in the 2nd book? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It sounds like a really questionable choice for a sequel. So those were the 8 books that I read this month. I hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. If you read any good books in July, you should let me know by commenting them down in the comment section below. I try and upload a video at least once a week, so I'll see all of you next week for my next video. Until next time, everyone, goodbye.